Hello everyone, and welcome back to WolfQuest, The Lost Tales, and we're going to be jumping right into what I believe is our 22nd story. I'm pretty sure. So we're going to just go ahead and jump right in. We're going to begin our quest, and we're actually going to be playing on challenging because we are going to be playing this time as Kamots. Now, some of you guys are probably going, hold up, wait a second, what's going on? If you've been following the polls, you might be wondering why we are following Kamots. And to that I say, wait and see. I have a plan. So, yes, there's been a little bit of an interesting thing that's happened here. If you guys were keeping up with which wolf we're going to be following, and a bit of an interesting thing is happening here. We're going to stop and hunt down this coyote, I think, to start off with. But yeah, a bit of an interesting thing is happening. I'm not going to explain it just yet. You guys will just have to hang tight, and all will be clear in time. I will explain more when the time comes. So for now, we're going to be following Kamots. And if we look here, if we look at our pack stats, he actually has 35% strength, 60% stamina, and 55% speed. So he's a pretty well-rounded wolf, but he's definitely a little bit stamina-oriented, and he's not quite as strong as a lot of our wolves have been, but he's still on the fairly high end compared to most of our wolves. Not the strongest, but also not among the weakest. And his challenge is actually going to be to try and hunt and kill 3 bull elk or moose, and that can be any type of moose, doesn't have to be a bull moose, over the course of his story, which means that we need to get a move on pronto. We can choose whether or not to find a mate and raise pups, although I can tell you right now I don't think we're going to raise pups. I don't think we're going to have time. We're going to be heading right over to the burn area this time, actually, and doing the best we can to get set up hunting, and then maybe we will go find a mate before we attempt our hunts, because it'll be nice to have a little extra help with this, because otherwise we're going to be in a bit of a tricky situation potentially, because we have to bring down 3 bull elk or moose, and that means that we only have 1 episode to prepare pretty much. The others are going to have to be actual hunting, and so it might help us out to have a mate, because those hunts can be fairly difficult, even with 2 wolves, and so playing as a lone wolf, it's going to be even tougher to pull off. Now, we've had some similar challenges recently, but I don't think anything quite to this degree. We have had wolves who have had to hunt down bull elk before, but I'm pretty sure Kamots has the highest number out of any of them, and so yeah, we're gonna be doing the best we can with this. The closest was Lexel, but her caveat was that she had to play in Lost River, where things were a little bit more difficult. Out here, it's a little more straightforward. We don't have to worry about chasing elks through the streets, but we do have to worry about just the sheer number of elk we have to bring down. We need to basically take down an entire herd of cow elk this turn, otherwise we're going to be in some trouble here. Now, thankfully I saw the ravens to figure out where this elk is, and don't worry about that glitchy arrow. That's what happens if you kill a hare. Sometimes it just freaks out a little bit until you lock on to something else. We're going to roll with it, but thankfully, even when you can't find the scents, oftentimes you can see where the ravens are, and that'll be a good clue as to where the elk are. Now, that's something I'm not sure if it's going to persist in WolfQuest 3 or not. It'd be kind of cool to see if it does, because that is a very helpful indicator of where the elk are. And it would be kind of neat to see, even at a distance, if there are ravens flying around, maybe you could follow them to find the herd. But again, I have no idea if that's going to be a thing or not. I don't think we've gotten any info on ravens and their presence or lack thereof in WolfQuest 3. And to be fair, the ravens are a bit more of a detail than a lot of the other animals that are in the game. And so it's understandable that we haven't really heard about them at this point in time, and about what they might be doing, if they're even going to be there or not. Now, at this point in time, again, let me just remind you that this is pre-recorded, because we are potentially, I'm gonna say near in the beta at this point, because the information that we have is that WolfQuest 3 is still hopefully going to come out by the end of the year, and given that it's now December, if beta testing has to start before, oh, there's a moose carcass down there. But given that beta testing has to start before the game can be released, and there's less than a month left in the year, it's going to be happening soon if everything stays on schedule. If not, well, we'll just keep going until it does. So just keep that in mind, that I can't actually respond to your comments. I will read them. I will take note of them. If I'm still recording series, I will apply them in the future. But yeah, at this point, we don't know when WolfQuest 3 beta is going to start. It could be any day, it could be happening at this moment, or it might not be at the time you guys are seeing this video. We just don't know. All we know is that it's got to be close if they're still hoping to release by the end of the year, which the last devlog that we saw, they still did say they're shooting for it, even if it does end up going a little bit into 2019. So I assume from that they're still close enough that it's a legitimate possibility, but again, I don't know. And with that said, I can't give any information about that sort of thing without permission, so if you guys ask me for spoilers, even though I'm on the beta team, I'm not going to be able to tell you. Most likely, any information that gets released is going to be via the team and their permission, so I'm beginning to regret giving Kamots lowered strength. But yeah, so just as another note there, I can't really give out info on the game. I wouldn't be allowed to. I'd have to ask for specific permission to do that. And so if you guys have any specific questions about the game, you'd be better off directing them to the WolfQuest team and not to me, because they'll be able to tell you right away what they can or can't say about it. So with that in mind, I'm hoping the beta will start soon. I'm hoping we are that close. It looks like they're that close from the devlogs. I mean, we just saw them putting the forest together. We've seen them working on the animal behaviors. It really does look like they're in the fine-tuning stage where they're kind of just getting everything tweaked and ready for a workable version of the game, but I don't know. Again, it's going to depend on them and when they feel ready for it, and that might be within the next couple of weeks here. It might not be. It might get pushed back. The release, I mean, might get pushed back to January. Hopefully not later than that. Again, I have to say I would be very surprised if it takes longer than 3 months, but at the most I wouldn't push it past 6 months. I think they are from everything we've seen in the devlogs, it does look like they are getting very, very close to being able to release. And so I do have hope that it'll be in the near future. If not by the end of the year, then certainly in the very beginning of 2019. But again, I just have to put that out there every time I talk about this, because I don't want to get swamped with questions and have to disappoint a bunch of you. I would rather let you guys know ahead of time so that you can prepare yourselves for that. But with that said, I do hope that I'll be able to release some blooper footage, at least, like I've been allowed to do in the past, because blooper footage can be pretty fun, and sometimes after the fact I'm allowed to release stuff like that, like I did with the moose oh so long ago, actually, in our very first WolfQuest series. The very first season of WolfQuest, I was allowed to release some blooper footage of the moose. So, again, I'm hoping that I'll get the opportunity to do that again, at the very least. So, we shall see. Again, it depends entirely on what the team says about that, and how they want to release their content, and I'm gonna abide by their rules in that respect. So, we'll see. I'm not gonna promise anything at this point in time. I can only say what I hope to do. But yeah, with that said, I'm going to try and bring down this whole herd of elk before the episode ends, because, not the bull elk, I mean, but all the cow elk. I'm going to try and do that before the episode ends, because we are going to need a lot of elk down to be able to start doing bull elk hunts, and we'll probably end up hunting the bull elk first, and then coming back and doing, hunting down some of the cow elk, perhaps, if we feel like we're going to run low on food for the next hunt. And we're just gonna whip through it as fast as we possibly can. And hopefully it works out. Hopefully we're not gonna run out of food. I am a little bit nervous about this for sure, because I do worry that we're not, oh my goodness, watch the elk watching us ominously in the background. Ooh, we're running a little low on health too. I bet the stamina does affect here, possibly how much damage you do when you bite too. So actually, maybe that's the advantage of bite holding, because a lot of you, there's like this divide over whether to bite hold or whether to not bite hold, and I've heard people say both ways. I've heard people say that bite holding isn't worth it. I've had people say, Jay, you should bite hold, and normally I don't. But we'll maybe try it out this time. Normally I save that for wolves that are either really slow or have really poor stamina, because then it's easier than having to catch up to the elk as you're losing stamina and starting to slow down, because then you have this long cooldown period where you kind of just have to stand here and let your health go back up. And so that's why I normally don't bite hold. I just have found that it's a little bit inefficient in my opinion, but in certain cases it works better than others. But I don't know, maybe that's the benefit of it. Maybe you do more damage right off the bat if you're bite holding. I don't know. I don't feel like I'm doing that much more damage than I would be in this amount of time. It actually feels a little slower. Now, granted, it probably does take less of a toll on your health because you don't usually get hit that many times, whereas there's a chance of being kicked every time that you bite. And so I think your health doesn't drain quite as much when you bite hold as it might otherwise. So you do... well... you do a little bit of damage, but I don't know, you guys. I don't feel like it's worth it in this case. I think I'll save the bite holding for our stronger wolves because I think that's where it's gonna come in handy more. I'm actually gonna stop and eat too because I'm taking a lot of damage here. And so we want to make sure we keep our health up for that and don't lose too much here. Now, also, this challenge is one of our less realistic ones too because usually a wolf wouldn't, like, set out to test its mettle like this. That's very bad in terms of survival. When you're trying to survive, you want to avoid doing stuff that's going to be excessively risky, and there's no real reason for a wolf to go after a bull elk unless it's somehow weakened or something, and, so there's no real reason for a wolf to deliberately seek out a challenge like some of ours do. That's a more human element and a more gamey element of our playthroughs, rather than it being strict realism where we would be always hunting the weakest elk. We'd be taking every chance, basically, to avoid taking risks. In our playthroughs, sometimes we do take risks. And that's okay. I mean, we just have to recognize that that's not what real wolves do. And the reason they don't do that is because when you think about a wolf in the wild, its goal is going to be to pass on its genes. That's why the whole gameplay of WolfQuest centers around finding a mate and having pups, because a wolf's life is successful in terms of nature if it's able to find a mate, have pups that survive and carry on its genetic lineage to the next generation. That's what these guys do, and it's not even so much that they deliberately set out to do that, it's just what their instincts tell them to do. Their instinct says find a mate, so they go find a mate. Their instinct says raise pups, so they raise pups. Some of those pups hopefully survive and go on to find mates and have pups of their own, and the wolf's lineage is preserved. And so survival in the wild is all about who gets to pass on their genes. And that's why you'll see a lot of competition between, especially prey species like this, where you tend to have a lot, like if you look at elk or bison, you tend to have one male that has then a bunch of females and will compete with other males for mating rights, basically. Well, that's a way of ensuring that the strongest ones are the ones that get to pass on their genes, so you don't see the population weaken as a whole, basically. It's kind of a safeguard against a population ending up sickly, because those weaker genes will then get weeded out of the gene pool. This is kind of how nature keeps itself healthy, and wolves have an important role to play in that for prey species as well, because they tend to kill off the sickly animals, and that again will remove them from the gene pool. And so that's kind of nature's way of keeping itself healthy, because if it didn't do that, then otherwise things would spiral out of control and into chaos. And so it's a self-sustaining natural system that helps keep the animal populations healthy. That design makes sure that the populations stay as healthy as they can be, and that's why when man tampers with nature, it usually doesn't go too well, because oftentimes we don't know what we're doing. And that was a bigger problem, especially in the olden days when people really didn't understand what they were doing, and that's why you end up with problems like, oh, people don't like wolves, and so they eradicated them from the Yellowstone area, and then guess what? The elk populations exploded, and they ate everything to the point where they started starving to death because there was nothing to keep them in check. And so, yeah, generally we have to be careful when we're meddling with nature, because a lot of the time we don't know what we're doing, even if we think we do. And so whenever you go in to affect a natural system, you want to be very careful of the impact you're having, because if it's not what you think it is, you could cause a real problem, and you don't want to do that. But yeah, so basically, risk-taking in the wild is a good chance, or a good way to get yourself killed. And of course, if you die, then you don't get to pass on your genes, and you'd be considered basically a natural failure, according to survival in nature. Now, thank goodness this isn't the way that human society works, because the humans are very different in that respect. We have the ability to look ahead to the future. We have the ability to see the greater picture. We have the ability to see a greater whole of things, whereas a wolf is going to be looking at what's going to be best for its survival, for the survival of its pack. A wolf can't look out and go, gosh, if I do this thing, it's going to be good or bad for the survival of wolves as a whole. No, wolves are just going to look out for their pack and those immediately around them and for themselves. And thankfully, that's not the way human society is supposed to work. Thankfully, we have the ability to see that bigger picture, and that's why we can look at nature and say, okay, this is something that's worth protecting, and this is something we need to be careful of. We can look and we can study and we can learn. And that's something that the animals don't do. That's what sets man apart from the animal kingdom, basically. We took a lot of damage during that fight. Wow. But yeah, so that's when I say this isn't the most realistic thing in the world. What I'm saying is that something like this would give Kamots a greater chance of dying, and of course if he dies without passing on his genes, then that's not good for the survival of his species. And so yeah, that's why instinct tells wolves not to do something like that. That's why they end up trying to be careful. That's why they look for the weakest prey rather than just going for the first elk that runs past them. They have to, otherwise their survival could be at risk. We're leaving this bull elk alone because we don't really have time to start that fight now, but we are going to run off to the slough territory here and see if we can find a mate, because that would help us a lot if we can manage to find a companion, to find someone to help us, because otherwise we're going to be very, very alone. And that's going to be much more difficult. And the challenge is not specific in that we're allowed to find a mate if we so desire. We don't have to try and take this all on alone. So let's head up this way and see what we can find up here, if we can find any wolves. I think we're in a pretty good position to find the scent trails. It looks like the wind direction is fairly okay, at least. Yeah, oh yeah, there's ones right here, so that's perfect. So we'll see if we can find a mate. We may or may not, and if not, then we'll go back, we'll do our hunt, and then we'll try again. Kind of like what we did do with Lexel's story a little bit ago. We'll probably use that same pattern for trying to find a mate here. So who do we have? Slough male. Are you going to be aggressive, probably? Yep, he is. I don't know, I feel like Kamots would stand his ground at least a little bit. We're doing a reasonable amount of damage because our stamina is up, so I think we should be okay, but hopefully, yeah, we're doing a lot of damage. So I think pretty much any wolf could probably defeat these stranger wolves. This is the one who fights to the death, isn't it? This might be the one who fights to the death. Oh man, yeah, you better run. Yeah, don't. Get out of here. You're not going to survive if you keep going. So that's a perfect example of survival instinct coming into play. He's not going to fight for the glory. He's not going to fight. He would rather preserve himself than end up dying in combat just because he wouldn't back down. It's not worth defending his territory, or if it means he's going to die. He's going to want to live to fight another day, even if he has to go off and find someplace else to live, even if he gets chased out of his territory, even if another pack were to come in and completely claim that away from him, he's going to want to live to fight another day. And so if it's a choice between surviving and winning, he's going to choose surviving. If it's a fight he can't win, he's going to back down. Oh, there's a coyote. We'll deal with this guy after. And maybe try and find a mate again, or maybe we'll just, you know what, I don't think we have that much time to find a mate, so I think we'll head back and we'll attempt our first hunt solo, and then try again once more, kind of like what we did with Lexel, where we didn't find a mate right away, and so then after we did the hunting, we came back and tried again. So we'll kind of follow that same pattern. We'll head right back out here and get ourselves set up for the next time. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up the episode here for today, though, because it is about that time again. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. But until then, this is Jay, over and out.